Hello, everyone. I'm Jamie Flinchball, host of People Solve Problems, and today we have as a guest Crystal Davis. How you doing, Crystal?
Hello, Jamie. I'm doing wonderful. How are you?
I'm doing great. So, really glad to talk to you about this. I've always enjoyed our conversations. As a formal introduction, you're the CEO of a boutique consulting company and coaching firm, The Lean Coach, and you're the corporate confidant to executives and emerging leaders. As an informal introduction, I'll say, as we've gotten to learn each other over the past few years, we've chewed some of the same dirt, as they say, and had some of the same influences, and our beliefs have about this work have kind of grown in similar paths.
Yes.
So I think I was first conversation. I was surprised at how familiar conversation with you felt. So I'm always looking forward to another one.
Absolutely. Same here. Same here. I would say the same. I often say I don't meet strangers, but I can definitely acknowledge when I meet someone that we have a real instant connection and alignment in the work that we do and the passion for the work that we do. So yeah, I'm excited to share that with you.
Excellent. Well, you spent a lot of time as a practitioner, as a leader, as a coach. Um, so I'd like to start, maybe in the deep end of the pool with, an example of a really difficult problem that you've had to solve in your past experience and how you approach that.
Oh, great question. And, where do you start? So, in the work that we do at the Lean Coach, I would say probably the most difficult is when I can't get the leaders to understand that their role as a leader has to change. That for me is the toughest part because I know that if they were just open to understanding what would
Mhm.
be different and how they would benefit from it, that they would run, not walk. And so I would say that for me has been the most difficult in the work. The process changes we do, easy. And the tangible changes we make, in the production floor or wherever we're doing work, easy. And even I found that asking associates to change, involving them in Kaizens and those kind of things, Jamie, easy, right? You get a little pushback here and
Sure,
there,
sure.
but the most difficult is when that leader understands or comes to the realization that their job is to change and transform the culture. And I'll say, so an example of that, most recently, is a facility that we have been doing some work in for about 6 months. And the plant manager said it's ready to go, right? You've got this, great. And several, let's just say, perfect storms came, some new products to the plant, some other things happened, some turnover, and it just literally slid almost all the way back.
Mhm.
And so to have that conversation with him and say, well, the key part that's missing is we didn't maintain the management routines and hold people accountable to the transformation. It takes 12 weeks. And then what is it, 12 weeks to change to get to form a new habit of consistent work?
Mhm.
So I would say for me, that is the most difficult.
That's
Um,
great.
yeah.
So you find the pain there when they experience the pain. So I get questions about that problem with a lot of the people I advise. They might be in a transformation role and they're looking to engage their boss, and I'm advising them. And I think there's so I'm curious about your approach because there's sort of let's pull out the playbook, right? And so let's go do these three things to try to get that leader engaged, sort of a fixed solution or a known solution to a known problem approach. And then the other approach is, well, let's be curious about root cause. Let's go understand what their particular barrier or friction point is that's preventing that. And so that's a choice, right, between
Yes.
those two forks. So how do you approach it? Do you ebb and flow based on your role, your situation, or what you know?
So I think that's a great question. So I'm a both and person. The first, again, it's a problem. It's sometimes less personal than the latter. And so with the latter, so I'll speak on the latter. With the latter, as you know, as coaches, it requires permission. I would say that my work with, Mr. Yamada and some of the folks in automotive, they didn't really ask permission, but I guess they said, you're here, so you must understand what you've signed up for
Right.
in the way that we coach. But when I think about, leaders and asking and working with them in a way that's going to get them to evolve as a leader, that's when I have to put the coach hat on.
Mhm.
And as a professional coach, we always have to ask permission. Can we coach? And are they open to going wherever the coaching conversation will take us? And then, of course, that also requires trust, right?
Yep.
And so the latter, while I try both, and the latter requires their active participation and willingness to allow you to coach them.
Yep.
So that
Absolutely.
would be my answer to that one.
Yeah, no, since you brought up both and thinking, we've recently had Dr. Wendy Smith, author of Both and Thinking, on the podcast. But I've always said this is a one heart, one mind at a time journey.
It is.
And so, yeah, you can issue a mandate to participate, but to engage requires a different heart and mind, and that's where it comes back to some of that. And I think the permission and trust is an important factor. And sometimes if you don't have it, I just go say, who else does?
Who else does?
Who else
Exactly.
does, and get
Yes.
them to engage
That's right.
to get there. So
That's right.
so I like that. So just another follow-up on that particular problem. Do you often find there's an inflection point where, they come in on a Monday and it's just different? Or is it the slow, gradual change where every week it's a little closer to what you expect? Or some of both?
Some of both, but I think more so it's when they experience pain. And if we've done our job right, we've been planting the seed. So even if they resist, we've been planting the seed long enough that when they reach that inflection point, that moment of pain, that they realize they have to make a conscious decision to step up in a different way or to show up in a different way. I think that's the pivotal moment when the real work happens. Now, of course, some people will ebb and flow in the change management curve, and they'll say yes and start. Things will get too difficult, they'll revert back, right? But again, that's our job as a coach to help keep moving them through. I won't even say moving them forward, moving them through the process and keeping in front of them the purpose and the reason why it's important for them to do that work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great. I mean, good sales is pain or gain. So
It's pain or gain.
gotta find one of those two to hook somebody. And they've already been shown the gains, right? And they just didn't engage. So it took the pain in those moments. So I think that's very rational. So let's get back to some of your problem solving. There's a lot of moments in that sort of storytelling and context of different levels of deliberate thought.
Yes.
So how do you identify those moments where you can't just power through, that you have to, activate some deliberate, thoughtful problem solving work?
Another great question. So I have found that the larger the objective, the more I've had to create and start my own A3s. And so I love one of my colleagues from Delphi introduced me to the folder method of A3. And so I've started traveling with manila folders because what I have found is that oftentimes I think that my past experience is the answer to a present situation. And it doesn't work the same because it's situational. I love that John Shook always talks about how lean is situational. And so what I have started to do more than I've done previously is preach what I taught. Pull out an A3 and I think through, what problem am I really trying to solve? Am I solving a leadership problem? Am I solving a process problem? Am I solving a leadership problem with someone who's just afraid? Is it me? Am I as the teacher? when I'm teaching, am I not truly teaching?
Mhm.
So I have gotten a lot more reflective in my process and started to just use the A3 process to even break down the problem, have some conversations with people to even validate that we align one on where we're going. I just had to do this last week. I had to really take a step back with a leadership group and ask the question, when I talk about lean transformation and they nod, do we have the same understanding of what that means and what it entails?
Mhm.
And so that's what I've started to do is in terms of how I'm looking at the process of helping organizations to transform as when we're not getting the results that we think we should get as a problem.
Yep.
And just using the A3 thinking process, A3 thinking process. 'Cause it ebbs and flows.
Yeah.
So
So I like how you start with saying you pull out an A3 and traveling with a manila folder. I'm almost entirely paperless now, so I
I
use
know,
and that
no.
that changes a bit. But I also have a whiteboard where I can do A0 problem
Yes.
solving. Think really big. Um, but I think there's a lot of people in the lean coaching consulting space that actually don't do it on themselves because they feel they have enough muscle memory to do it in their head. Um, so I'm just curious about how many A3s a year do you think you might do for yourself, or what even as many as you've coached and as many of you've done, what do you still get out of it? Because I'm sure you can see the picture of an A3 in your head. So what do you still get out of it from pulling out a piece of paper and physically doing that A3?
I love that question. So, do you know when we talk about the management system and we still have people utilize the whiteboard,
Hmm.
they may use red marker if they didn't achieve the target, green if they did, and then they've got the countermeasures. There is something inherent for me when I am stuck in a problem or I am swirling in, potential solutions or countermeasures, that when I write it down, I am more, it's almost like a way of journaling for me.
Yeah.
And it helps me see bigger because I can draw pictures. I can say, here's some data I need to go gather. I can write out phrases. So for me, it gives me an opportunity to get out of my head and see. I can see the small narrow aspects that I've thought about, then I can also see the whole.
Yeah.
So that is why I was just, saying I like that my colleague showed that to me last year, and I was like, it's because I used to process in my head, okay, define the problem. Right? Do we have data to substantiate the problem? And let's have a little catch-ball session. I can walk through the steps
Hmm.
to get to the countermeasures that we need to go implement and then how we analyze those. But for me, what I found so helpful is I got out of my own way of having the answer
Hmm.
because I'm the coach consultant coming in, and I could see the whole. And in seeing the whole, it allowed me to see gaps that I didn't think about
Yep.
and where I needed to gather more information.
Yep. I love it.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll say, Jamie, I know we need to be mindful of time, is that the other piece that I'll say that's not so tangible is it helped me make sure that I wasn't leaving other people behind.
Hmm.
It's easy for me as a coach consultant to go in and do it. I know what needs to be done. Let me just go in and do it. But then I leave people behind. Sustainability is not there. They don't have a chance to learn.
Yep.
So that's the other benefit that I've seen from that.
Excellent. I find myself doing it sometimes in whole and sometimes in pieces.
Yes.
I had
Yes.
I had one the other day where I knew what the solutions were. I didn't need a lot of creativity there, but I still built built a comparison chart to look at the decision criteria and select the right solution because I knew I had one criteria that was emotionally pulling me a direction, but it wasn't allowing for a rational, objective, big picture decision. And I think the decision ended up being the same as the emotional one, but at least I know I got
At least
there.
you vetted it, right?
I vetted it and I got there rationally.
That's a level of maturity, though, that I think we don't talk about enough in our community as coaches and consultants.
I agree.
Yeah.
I'm glad we got to go there.
Yeah.
So you get to, you get to work with a lot of different people, inside, outside companies. How do you change your approach? How do you flex your approach and your style, based around compatibility or the fit with someone else?
I wouldn't say that I change my process. So I typically follow a roadmap process, but within each step of the process, I have to quickly understand the culture, the readiness of the organization to change, and I need to understand their tolerance for the nudge. How much nudging can they take? I always tell this joke. I worked for um, this one company in 2016, 2017 that I was working with, and the operations manager would always say, Crystal, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like you come in and you give me a hug and kick me in the shin at the same time, right? And it's like you just got to know, you got to have that ability to sense when they've reached their point of stretch. And then, okay, now you need to nurture, and then you stretch some more and nurture. And so it's intuitive.
Yeah, but you kind of listed some of the variables there. So you have a framework.
I have a framework.
And on each one of those elements of the framework, you have a dial that you could either turn up or turn down based on the music that's playing. And adjust based on what's going on. But how to change those dials is experience-based intuition, which is I always like to say intuition is science that we just don't understand yet. But it's a really complex problem to solve. So it calls for an awful lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and I would also say it requires just a bit of self-awareness and also EQ to understand what's going on around. So like the example I gave you in our, prequel conversation, I had to say, there's a perfect storm here of a lot of things that came at this facility and this site, right, at one time. So just having that level of awareness.
Yeah, and I think, reflecting on it for me is my awareness is that there's only certain settings on my dials that I'm willing to go to. Right. And so there'll be, somebody might want me to, hey, we want you to lead us through step by step from beginning to end and be our source. And I'm like, that's not what I do. It's not what is interesting to me. So, and I'm fortunate that I get to say no to things, but yeah, it's my self-awareness is where am I activated the most, where am I at my best, and where am I not, kind of based on where those dials need to be.
That's right.
In the framework.
That's another important element that we should consider in our community. What is your specific zone of genius? And what are your boundaries?
Yep.
Right. Because I think that there could be harm and damage in yielding in a way that's outside of what you like to do and how you show up energetically, what your boundaries are, and also your zone of genius. Yep. And I think that's how we get to a lot of misconceptions and stray away from the foundational elements.
Yeah. And there's always learning to be had when you do that. Exactly. But there's also, competence and performance. So
yes, exactly.
So thank you for sharing your perspectives, some of your history, your challenges, and how you approach them. I think there's a lot of wisdom and insight and all of that. I hope our listeners get the most out of it. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. And always enjoy talking with you.
Of course, always.
Thanks for listening to the People Solve Problems podcast. Let's keep the conversation going. Visit jflinch.com for more episodes and other content. And continue to join us on your podcast app, of course. We greatly appreciate your feedback through reviews and ratings. Consider expanding your understanding of problem solving with Jamie's book, People Solve Problems: The Power of Every Person, Every Day, Every Problem. Available on Amazon. Until next time, keep learning, innovating, and solving problems.